Hi, it's your brother Marcus from the Netherlands to Kingdom Come. Welcome to episode 1, season 4.
You don't see daily news and probably not even weekly news about Jared Kushner and what he's doing. But we know from months before that he's been over there for President Trump to organize a peace treaty between Israel and the surrounding Arab nations. Now, you know, last week the UAE signed an agreement with Israel, and the whole deal was brokered by, surprise, Jared Kushner.
Your presidential advisor, Jared Kushner. Jared, thanks for the time. Want to talk about this big peace deal between Israel and the UAE. We heard the president talking about it. Wonder if you could kind of lift the veil about how we as a country got here.
Sure. Well, thank you, Brett. It's great to be with you today. And, you know, being in Washington, there are a lot of days where you see a lot of process, you see a lot of posturing, but it's very rare that you have a day where you can truly celebrate a historic achievement that will really change the course of a region and the world. This is something the president really started on his first foreign trip. We went to Saudi Arabia in May of 2017. I believe you were there, actually.
Yep.
And at that speech, the president laid out a new vision for the region. Since then, President Trump has taken back the territorial caliphate of ISIS. He's killed several of the terrorist leaders. He's brought all the people in the region together, and he's worked very closely with Israel and with other Arab countries to align them around shared interests and also to make sure that they can together combat common threats. So this was a very intense set of diplomacy. It's taken 3.5 years, but President Trump now has really set the stage in the Middle East to accomplish this historic breakthrough.
And if you go to that slide I was telling you about, which is 52, you'll see an article about what he's doing over there. And he's not talking just with the UAE or, Oman or any of those. He's talking with all of them behind the scenes. And I think we're going to see this peace treaty come together where all of the Arab nations, including the people of the Palestinian location, will sign an agreement with Israel. But what I'm afraid of is that they're organizing a division, a two-state solution. That's the only thing that the Palestinians will agree to.
Yeah, he suggested that there may be other countries coming on board. Are there?
We have a lot of interest from a lot of countries. You know, people are often afraid to go first. I think a lot of countries are watching to see how this plays out. So far, it's been very positively received in the country. And a lot of these people, they don't want to focus on past conflicts. They want to focus on how they can have a better future. They want their children to lead better lives than them. They want security. They want economic prosperity. And if you look at the United Arab Emirates and you look at Israel, they're both technology powerhouses, financial powerhouses, and most importantly, security powerhouses.
Now, the Palestinians are not really a country. They are a gathering of people grouped together and calling themselves the Palestinians. They are really not a nation. In Daniel, he does talk about the Antichrist at this time will sign an agreement between Israel and many countries, which we assume are all the Arab countries around them. But the guy that signs that is going to be the Antichrist. There are going to be a number of people sign it, but he will be among them, the Antichrist. Now, is that going to be Mohammed bin Salman? I still think so. But when Daniel says he'll make this agreement with a small people, with the help of a small people who will come to power, that perfectly fits Palestinians.
The Middle East has made a significant step towards peace after Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain signed historic deals. US President Donald Trump presided over a ceremony at the White House today as leaders signed the Abraham Accords. The declarations are intended to formalise the normalisation of diplomatic relations between Israel and the two Gulf nations. The UAE and Bahrain are the first Arab countries to sign diplomatic recognition accords with Israel in almost 26 years. President Trump declared the pact the dawn of a new Middle East.
This is peace in the Middle East without blood all over the sand. I say it. Right now, it's been blood all over the sand for decades and decades and decades. That's all they do is they fight and kill people, and nobody gets anything.
The agreements do not address the decades-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict, despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling the day a pivot of history.
The blessings of the peace we make today will be enormous. Let us put all cynicism aside. Let us feel on this day the pulse of history. For long after the pandemic is gone, the peace we make today will endure.
Mass protests have broken out in Palestine, in the West Bank and in Gaza, where pictures of Trump and Netanyahu and several Gulf Arab leaders have been set on fire.
It's dividing Israel, by political boundaries and whatever. But you know that as soon as you divide Israel, whoever's responsible for that, they're going to divide you.
I want to ask you another question about this. And first, I want to let you listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu and his comments late this afternoon.
Sure.
This is the greatest advancements toward peace between Israel and the Arab world in the last 26 years. This is a future of peace, a future of security, and a future of prosperity.
When did the Prime Minister finally agree to hold off on annexation? And do you have a sense of how long this pause is going to be?
So we've been speaking about what annexation would look like for the last 6 months. The Prime Minister really is a historic leader. He's a visionary. He was able to agree to a two-state solution with the Palestinians on the basis of President Trump's vision for peace, and to have the first time we ever had a map forward.
And okay, so as I understand it, and maybe this is just anecdotal, this would put the Al-Aqsa Mosque under Israeli control, right?
Well, that's probably the way it's going to be. And there are some interesting things happening over there on the Temple Mount. But the Israelis, if they get control of it, Jordan has to agree with that. And we'll get to slide 54 in a minute, where Jordan's prime minister, has his thoughts on this peace deal. Jordan and Saudi Arabia are the two guys you want to see sign this agreement. Assuming, of course, that the agreement would work well and everybody be happy, Israel and all that kind of stuff. But there are so many behind-the-scenes deals going. When I say behind the scenes, they're not reporting it in the press very much at all. They're trying to be low-key. Sale of F-35s to the UAE or any of the Arab countries, except for Iran, of course. We're not going to deal with them. But right now, Jordan has control of the Temple Mount. So under the New Deal, Israel would have control, or at least be able to access the Israeli portion of the Temple Mount, which is now going to be a little bit bigger than we thought before. Look at slide 50. Look at slide 50.
All right.
Slide 50 says, mystery, new pit opens in Temple Mount floor. Now, this is over the southern part of the Temple Mount. And it's a tile broke free and fell down a hole. Is it a tunnel? Is it a room? Who does it belong to? Now, if Israel gets control of that area, which would probably be nice, they may be able to find the original instruments for the Temple of Solomon. You can see a picture of it there in the article, and then a little video that gives you a bit of a stir around to see what it is. But this is going to affect the treaty. And this just popped up by an act of God. Somebody stepped on it too hard or something, and bang, this tile falls down. And whoa, here's an unknown chamber, a tunnel down underneath the Temple Mount. And if I understand vaguely where it is on the southeastern part of the Temple Mount, it's right over where Solomon's stables used to be. It depends on how far south it is. But anyway, it's going to be a very interesting thing to dig up. And this may well affect the peace treaty. Wouldn't it be cool if down in that place they find the original temple artifacts, the gold and brass and all of the things they made, and even perhaps the Holy of Holies place?
All right, I want to turn to the election. You're deeply involved. You were last time, you are this time. You just heard our new Fox News poll with former Vice President Biden leading by 7 points in that poll. But in the job performance, the president is at 44%, disapprove 54%. And in who is trusted to do a better job on different issues, the president is up 3 on the economy, but he is losing to Vice President Biden on a number of key issues. Where do you see this race right now?
So we've spoken about the methodology of the Fox polls, and we saw in the last election, out of 120 polls conducted in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania between Labor Day and the election, out of 120, only one showed President Trump ahead.
And I was watching Hal Lindsey with Hollier over the weekend, and he was talking about, how the revived Roman Empire is going to have 10 nations, and he talked about the European Economic Community, the primary nations are 10 in count, but then they're much more, another 30 or 40. I don't think that assessment of the revived Roman Empire is going to work, because when Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream about, the statue, the 2 legs were of iron going down to toes on 2 feet, mixed iron and clay type nations. It didn't say 40 nations. It said 10, 5 on each foot. And the fact that it is specific about 2 nations, 2 legs, tells you that you go to Turkey, where the original last Roman Empire was, where you had the western going up into Europe and the eastern over into the Middle East, into Iraq, Iran, and that sort of stuff. So you got those 2 legs, and that you're going to have 5 countries from each of those branches that will be involved in the Antichrist new world order. And apparently 3 of those 10, I don't know which 3, will not submit to the new world leader, and they will be attacked and, made to submit, and he'll be in control of their governments as well. I thought at one time myself that the 10 nations would be what the Club of Rome put was the 10 regions of the earth. But I think I want to correct that now. I was telling Holly I think I'm going to have to pull that idea back, even though there are 10 regions specified for the whole planet. I think if it's really the revived Roman Empire following the old model, it will be centered in Turkey, going to the west and to the east. Could be wrong. The assessment I made about the 10 global nations from the Club of Rome report may be correct still, but I'm happy to say I could be wrong and put this other possibility in there now that I've had to think about it. Anyway, I've got off track on that. I think America is going to be taken down because it's an arms supplier, it's a strong military, and it has to be taken out of the way for the Antichrist to work his work in all the other nations of the world and be in control of them. We are, we're sliding downhill rapidly. In slide 49 tonight, I have a picture of MBS and his dad, King Salman, on the right. The article is about Israeli Mossad intelligence chief says the Saudis are going to be next to recognize Israel, but after the U.S. election, because they want to decide which president they're going to give the credit to, Biden or President Trump. In slide 50, if you click on the picture, it's a distribution map showing the Sunni Muslims, where they live and the density of them, and the Shiite Muslims, or Shia Muslims on the right in the blue. Now, this tells you that the majority of the terrorists, the Islamic terrorists, are in Iran, and then followed by Iraq, and somewhere sort of down by Yemen. And you go to the left, you've got Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, West Bank, Syria, all very strong, peaceful Sunni Muslims. So you're not seeing, terrorists come so much from there as you are from the areas in the blue side of the map. If you go back to the text on that slide 50, the majority of Muslims are Sunnis. Estimates suggest the figure is somewhere between 85 and 90%. Shia make up roughly 10%. That's the terrorist types in Iran, Iraq. Shia make up roughly 10%. And globally, their population is estimated between 154 to 200 million from a 2009 report. The Middle Eastern countries with the greatest proportion of Sunnis, the peaceful ones, are Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, with Sunnis making up 90% or more of the population in those places. So where there are, concentrations of either type of Islam, they make up about 85 to 90% of the population of that country. And that's kind of the battle lines drawn, if you wish, between the orange map and the blue map. You just draw a line kind of down the middle of those two there into, the Red Sea, I suppose. No, go over to, it'd be over to the Saudi Gulf, the Gulf of Arabia there. And that's the kind of the middle line of the major parts or players of this Islamic war between themselves, civil war. Now, this is breeding a war between those two and Israel. Now, Israel has minor amounts of Sunnis and minor amounts of Shia Muslims in there. So I see that we're going to be getting a conflict over there reasonably soon. Now, whether it be before the treaty between Israel and the surrounding Arab nations is made or not, I don't know. If something happens before the election to create strife in that area, then the United States may have to get ready for war here on the home front, because the Russians and the Chinese and whatever Middle Eastern country joins them, probably Iran, will want to take America out of the game so that they can pounce on Israel. The impetus for a peace treaty between the Arab nations, both kinds of Muslims, and Israel, the impetus is not strong enough at this point to get all the other Arab nations to join, with UAE and Bahrain and Sudan and those that are now signing a peaceful agreement with Israel. It takes something shocking, and I think that will be the discharge of nuclear weapons by Israel on some of its enemies or invading forces. And I think that may actually hit Saudi Arabia, because they've got a large number of weapons and troops that they could move in to Israel. And as I understand it, Saudi Arabia is going to take a little bit of a beating in the field from Israel when they do eventually mount an attack on Israel.
What about the Psalm 83 war?
This 83 war is launched against Israel, and the other nations of the world say, "Oh, look, this is going to breed a nuclear war. We need to make a peace treaty and in a world government." Now, or will the 83 war come after the Antichrist has set up the government, world government, and is using these nations to gain control of Israel? I don't know. It's something that I am studying, and have opinions that are bouncing back and forth about that. There are going to be two wars over there, I think, that'll take place. And one of them will cause the peace treaty, if I look at it properly, and the other will be conquering Israel, and that will be at the hands of the Antichrist.